Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Dana. I'm the Heal Her Art instructor. Today we are going to be learning about watercolor paints and how to make watercolor phrase art. I'm going to start off here with a brief presentation, and then in the middle of the presentation we're going to get everyone working together and do a sample watercolor. Thanks for the messages, ladies. I appreciate that. I'm sharing my screen now so that y'all can see. All right, so if someone could please give me a thumbs up that the PowerPoint that I have right now is the main screen. All right, perfect. Thank you so much. The Next Stage program is brought to you by Heal Her Art, a wellness program for women veterans, and is sponsored by the American Legion Auxiliary Foundation Veterans First Limited, Arizona Commission on the Arts, and the American Legion of Peoria, Arizona. Watercolor Phrases Kit. So you should have received all of the materials to make a beautiful or multiple beautiful watercolor paintings. You will need to provide a few items from home to include paper towel, cup of water, ruler, pencil, and eraser. During this session, we'll learn about the basics of watercolor, how to draw the phrases out on the watercolor paper. We'll paint watercolor sections, but then also you'll learn about embellishing the design with a marker. So you can make this as ornate or as plain as you like. And the phrases can be personal, motivational, or seasonal in content. Okay, so let's quickly review watercolor techniques. So here is a brief overview of different watercolor techniques. And really, I found that any watercolor set at any price point can yield beautiful paintings. So it's really in all how you use the paint itself. So picture here are watercolor commonly used techniques. And from this chart, you'll see that wet on dry, flat wash, and graded wash are the best for this particular project. In my opinion, there's really no difference between wet on dry and the flat wash. So we're going to practice the graded wash soon. So before I begin creating, I like to know what materials I'm working with. And we're going to quickly sample the colors to see what they look like. So we're going to grab that smaller watercolor sheet, and on the back side of that sheet that has the rectangle, we're going to be using the side that does not have the penciled rectangle. And we're going to test the colors from heavy to lighter pigment. Watercolor paint is activated with water, and it's meant to be translucent in application, so it's never meant to be thick or dark like an acrylic paint. We will now sample each color, and you never want the paint to be drippy, or do you want the paint to be, the paint well to be filled with water in your paint set. So we're going to be getting water as we need. I'm going to stop my sharing here. Make sure that there's no one else that needs to get in. And I'm now going to spotlight my workspace here. All right. So here we are, our workspace. I did put this art in place just temporarily as a placeholder. All right, so if you would please just grab your small piece of watercolor paper. We are going to test and sample our watercolors. Then we know what the colors look like. And so when we start actually painting our art, we'll already have an idea of what colors we like and which colors we really don't like. So I've got my cup of water, paper towel, my brush with the green handle. I've got my set of watercolors. And I really just like to work from one end to the other of the page. And my goal really here is just to see how dark do I get and how light can I get. So I'll grab a little bit of water, and I'm going to just start off with the purple. So I've got my brush loaded with some watercolor paint, and I'm just going to just do a little stripe down the side of the page here. And then once I get closer to the bottom, I'll just add a little bit more water just to thin out the color, and that will allow me to see what is the lightest light I can get with that color. Once I'm done with that color, then I clean my brush off and I move directly to the next color in line in my watercolors. So then I go ahead with the red. I add a little, about halfway through, I add a little bit of water, and that dilutes that color and allows me to see what the faintest color will be for that particular watercolor. You can continue for the rest of the colors at your own pace, but of course, our goal is to make sure that we fit all of the colors in on this one page here. So I'll continue through. This allows you, again, to see what colors you have at your available to you, but then also what the range is with that particular color. And to be honest with you, I actually do this with my acrylics as well. You can make just a small little, on a scrap piece of paper or on the side of a canvas, the back of a canvas, just test out the paint just to see what it looks like when it dries. Sometimes it's just really hard to identify what the paint looks like just out of the tube, or in this case, in the paint well. I hope right now you have had an opportunity to look over the written materials, because we are going to be shortly painting a word on the other side of this sample here, just to practice and see how these paints work. So I'll give you another minute or so to work on your watercolor swatches here. This is going to be your reference going forward to help you plan the colors that you would like to use for your artwork. Once you have completed this portion of the watercolors, go ahead, set the watercolors aside along with the brush and your cup of water. We will be using our ruler, pencil, eraser, and that larger piece of watercolor paper next. So I'll check in with everyone to see how everybody's doing. Make sure you're ready to move on. Beautiful. Thanks, Kelly. Ready to move on to the next step here. Everybody's good to go? Just give me a thumbs up. Thanks, Gabe. Perfect, Connie. I appreciate that. Pamela, good. Jennifer, all right. Terry, wonderful. Ms. Becky, hopefully you're good to go for the next step here. So I'm going to rearrange my cameras here for a moment because I'd like to just quickly review some more information before we move to the next step. So we'll set that watercolor sample aside to dry. Right. All right, so I am now sharing my screen. Ladies, can you just give me a thumbs up? Make sure that that is the biggest on the screen there. Perfect, thank you, I appreciate that. Just when I think it's not, or that it is, it actually is not. All right, so the next thing that we're gonna do, and before we do it, I'd like to just talk about it so you can just have a good understanding of where we're going next. We're going to be drawing a frame on that larger piece of paper. And using the ruler, we're going to give us a frame of about an 8 by 10. And so that gives us about a ½ inch border all the way around. And whenever I do watercolor, I like to have a border because it allows me to test out the color before I actually commit. And so also it gives you a little bit more leeway for when you're doing your framing. So a ½ inch border all the way around on that larger piece of paper. We can go ahead and do that now. For later on, I have on the right here, you can make some smaller works of art, 2 frames on the same page. Go ahead and grab your ruler. And we'll just, in pencil, give us a nice frame. Like I said, it's about a ½ inch or so, but really, ideally, you're looking for an 8 by 10. And some of the paper, because of the way the watercolor paper is, there's a little bit of an overhang, a little bit of a fray. And so what I'll do is I'll take my ruler and I'll kind of center it on the page itself. And then from there, I'll put my tick marks for the ½ inch. So once we get the tick marks in, then you make your lines. We'll have a nice rectangle. So we're just working on that right now. We will not be doing too much on this larger watercolor paper tonight. This will be for you, but I wanted to get you started so at least you had a good understanding of where to go to once we're done today's class. Not only will this video be available on the YouTube channel, which I did put in the email there, but I also have a professional video that I made. It's about 7 minutes long, but it's like kind of like a fast-paced version of tonight's class. So you can quickly review that if you forgot something or just wanted to see it again. It's got some interesting music in it. I was able to find online some copyright-free music for my fast forwards of during the watercolor while it's drying sections. So it is interesting music, but hopefully relaxing. All right, friends, we have our rectangle already in place on our paper. So right now, I don't want you to do it quite yet, but I want you to think about, you've already selected your phrase. You could choose a phrase. I've given you a sheet of inspirational phrases, or you've got a phrase in mind that you really like. So what I'd like to do is divide that phrase up into lines or sections of words. And I try to go with no more than 2 to 3 words per line. And so based on how many words you have per line and how many words are in your phrase, depends on how many of those wavy lines that you have. You can choose to do a vertical or horizontal orientation. Does not matter to me. It's your personal preference. So here on the screen, I've got a couple examples. I also did this activity with a literacy program and they loved it. So that's why these particular phrases are about books. Okay, so now we're going to get started on our example for our words, but I'm going to quickly go over the steps of what we're going to be doing here. So we're going to take our small paper here that our watercolor should be for the most part dry. So as I'm talking here, hopefully it is going to be dried by the time we actually get to painting. So the first section here, number 1, you can see that I've put some wavy lines in that rectangle so that at least I can mimic the idea of continuing on my phrase. Then number 2, once I've penciled that in for number 1, number 2 is I start painting in my sections. Now you can see I leave spaces in between. This is very important to leave the spaces, because what will happen if you do not is that all those colors will blend together. It'll be like a wet on wet. And so to help keep those colors segregated, we just leave a little space, let the color dry, and then come back to it. Section number 3, you can see all of the colors are there in place, they are dry. And step number 4, they're ready to be outlined in black. So that's what we are going to do right now. And I am going to spotlight. All right, hopefully my camera on my hands is the largest on the screen. Can I get a thumbs up to make sure that that is correct? All right, perfect, thank you. Great question here, ladies. Do you just leave the brush in the cup of water? I do not, because I always find that the longer you leave the brush in the water, the bristles start to take the shape of the bottom of the cup. So I just rinse off my brush and then set it aside. So I'm gonna set this larger paper aside because I'm ready to go back to my smaller watercolor paper. All right, so here's my rectangle, and I'm going to also pull out my watercolors, though I'm not using them quite yet. But while I'm kind of letting some of this, maybe this needs to dry a little bit more, I'm just gonna set it down, let it dry up a little bit more, and grab my materials. I've got my cup of water, paper towel, the paints, the brush, and believe it or not, the pencil and eraser. Now, you may be using an eraser on your pencil, which is perfectly fine. I like this retractable eraser. I've always used this for small drawing details. It is one of my favorites. But a regular eraser on a pencil, or maybe one of those larger erasers that you have, would work just fine also. I like this smaller one because I can get into some smaller sections and not erase everything around it. Okay, this is just from an arts and crafts store, and it has refills that it comes with. It's a retractable eraser there. I think you can also get it from like office type stores as well. Okay, so to start off with, I would like for you to select a word, and I've given you some words to use for this sample here. Peace, create, inspire, joyful, worthy. I'm going to go with the word joyful. You can use any word you like. So that's a finished painted joyful. I'm going to go with joyful. And to start off with, I'm going to put some wavy lines in. at the top and the bottom. I don't want them to always mimic, be parallel and exactly mimic the opposite, because I want to give more variety. So I put my pencil lines in there for the top and the bottom of the rectangle. So theoretically, down in this space here, this space here, this is other lines of text. Okay. I just did that. I just colored that in just so you could understand and see that that is where our other lines of text will be. What I'd like to do is, I told you, between 2 to 3 words per line. But since it's only one word in this line, I try to center the word. And so I've got the word joyful here. And I try to center it so at least I've got a little bit of space on each end. And if it works out that I don't, that's okay. But I like to do the first letter and the last letter. So I'll go ahead and I'll put that in place. And I'll follow the contour of that curve. So I've got my J, and I'll put my L in here. And I like to put just a little tick mark at the end of the L, because I found that as I put the Sharpie or the marker or even the watercolor back over top, it's hard to see where the letters begin and end, and then where your lines are. So I just like to put just a hair of a tick mark. You don't have to do that. That's just me, what I like to do. It's kind of my my style. So now that I've got the first and last letter of the word in place, I'll evaluate what are the other letters that I have, and I try to center them and fit them all in that space. So I'm going to, it looks like my F and Y are in between them is the center of my word. So I'll find my center, and just a hair offset is where I'll put my Y and my F. I try to space them out so they're relatively equal spaced. If you end up messing up or your spacing is off, that's where the eraser comes into play. And then, of course, center the O and the U. So once you are satisfied with the spacing of all of your letters in the designated space here, you can start adding your watercolor. For this sample here, we are just going to choose any colors. In just a moment, I will talk about different color variations that you can choose for your artwork. But for this sample here, we're just gonna have fun and pick whatever colors. So when we paint, we're gonna start from one end and leave a space and continue through, so that when those are dry, hopefully, fingers crossed, that when we're done and we get to the end, we can continue through with those empty spaces. If you're ready, you can proceed now to start painting, and you can do the rainbow colors if you like, or maybe if you want to mix some colors, you can use, I'm going to just go with a red and purple mixed together. This is where I'm playing, so I can see if I like these colors together for my final. So it doesn't matter which end you start at. You remember to try not to have too much water built up. We don't want puddles. So if you were to pick your watercolor up, we don't want there to be any drips. And once you get a color in place, let's just say that you are working on your full design and you really like that color, you can continue that color other areas of the artwork. But I'm going to clean mine off and get a new color here because I want to play around with some colors. I like to see what my options are. I'm going to mix the green and yellow together. And you can use that plastic section, the lid of the watercolors, to mix instead of in the actual paints itself. Or if you've got a plastic palette, you could use that as well. So I can tell already I've got a good amount of paint, water on my brush. So I'm going to be real careful here to make sure that I don't get too many puddles. So I just used the tip, I didn't push down too hard. And maybe I just want to be, oh, great question here. If you, the color of an E, so for an E, you will use the whole space. So I'm going to quickly just put another piece of paper in front here. For my E, I will point to it. It is literally the whole section wherever the one side of the E is, if you've got an E in your word. Thank you for that question. So if you are, like I was saying, if you're lazy, like sometimes I'm lazy, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that green's cool. I'm gonna go with that. All right, I'm just gonna mix up another color. Fine, keep the color you've already got on your brush, and let's add a little more pigment to it. Let's add another color and continue on here and make another color. And again, remember, you can use that edge, that extra space around your design just to test the color to see what you think. And maybe things are starting to get a little too dark for you and you want to lighten it up, so you just add a little more water. What I'll do in order to add water and lighten things up is I'll actually just clean the brush and then go back into that color. And that gives me a much lighter version of that color. Now I have done black before. I'm not a big fan of it, but for testing purposes, I'll go ahead and I'll do that again. I like this color to maybe darken or deepen up some of the other colors. It gave me like a really nice navy, a dark green tone. So I do like using the black for that, but I'm not really a big fan of it by itself. But if you were doing something like a monochromatic, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that's colors that are close together on the color wheel, then maybe black might be a great use for you to make some variety when you're just using one or two colors. Okay, so we're gonna let this dry for a moment. It looks like I am drying up, but I'm not gonna push my luck on it. So I'm gonna let it dry, and I'm gonna talk to you ladies a little bit more about different colorways that you can use for your artwork. So I'll come back to my video here. Okay. So like I was saying about the monochromatic, here's a few examples of color options for your phrases. So the monochromatic colors are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. And so this example shows a variation of blue, purple, and then the mixture of the two colors together. Wet on wet is when you continue to blend the colors They're slightly overlapping with a little bit of water. You can blend them with that water, and then it gives a nice smooth transition of the color. And then here at the bottom, the single color gradation is the option. Maybe you really just want simple. And so using that one color and adding water to it as you proceed across the page lightens and softens that color up for you. So we're still letting our artwork dry here. So when we are finished with our watercolor phrases here, just painting it all, we have to decide how we're going to make the words pop and how we're going to make them legible for people to read the phrase. And so you've got a few options here. I've given you an example. Number one is just that basic line with the marker. Number two is an outline with the watercolors. And if you go with this option, you'll want to choose a darker color if you like this look. I really do, because I feel like it's the continuation of painting with watercolors, and it gives you that painterly feel, and I really like that about it. The last one is kind of fun and different. It's using the marker to make patterns to really embellish your design. So you can see here, I did use lowercase letters just to see what it would be like, and I found that the A was a no-go. The E worked okay, but A just was, is it an O, is it a Q, is it a G? I don't know. So I don't necessarily recommend using too many lowercase, but it might be interesting to combine the uppercase and lowercase letters together to make a creative design. All right, so we're gonna now go back. Hopefully you could see what I was showing there. I don't know, maybe if I was just still on my spotlight here, but I would like to continue painting and fill up the rest of the colors. If you are still a little wet, you can give it a good shake, a good wave here to dry off your, dry that watercolor up a bit. But I'm pretty dry towards this the area that I started. So I'm going to continue with my watercolor here. And if at any time you feel maybe you've got too much water on there, just touch your brush on the paper towel, and that picks up the water from your brush. If you are doing the joyful like me, you will know that it's going to take just one more dry time to come back to that section next to that Y there. So I've got one more section that's going to be drying up here, and while that's drying, I can quickly go over some additional ideas that I did not share in the video tutorial, but thought that might be interesting for you if you like to add a little extra something in your artwork. So I'm going to just move this off to the side and let that dry up and show you this other artwork here. So I mentioned that I did this artwork for a literacy program, but what I wanted to point out more specifically was that I chose for the O to use a snowflake. I also chose to use snowflake designs, and that was done with the marker throughout the artwork itself. There may be other designs and shapes that you can add to your phrase art here in the extra spaces, or even to take the shape of an O or a letter. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility. In this example here, I did if you look at the colors here, it is kind of that rainbow effect. I have purple, went to the reds, oranges, yellows, back to reds and purples. In the bottom of the next line here, it's the blue, green, and I actually transitioned to brown and red and then back to the green and blue. So the way that I did these particular lines here was started with one color, went to two other colors, and then went back to that color that I started with. So that is also a possibility as far as a colorway for you. All right, so I'm going to go back to my piece here. It is almost dry, and I will add a little bit more color in that one section. And that's dark. Ooh, that's black. So I'm lightening it now, and the way that I'm going through it is I'm taking my brush, picking up the ink that's there, and then cleaning my brush off, drying it off, and then coming back to the space. And that is lifting that original paint that I put down. And so now it's not nearly as dark as it was before. So we'll give it a moment to dry up, and then we'll do the marker to outline the word. I'll switch them here. We're going to do the basic for this practice tonight, and then on your own, allow you to practice with making some funky patterns over your letters, or trying out that watercolor outline of the text itself to see if you like that look. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat there. I'm sure that if you have a question, someone else probably has the same question. There is no stupid question here. So I'm going to go ahead and put my watercolors aside, clean the brush off, and set that aside with the water. I try to clean my space up when I go back and forth because I am a klutz and accidents happen too often for me. And so whatever I can do to help myself out, just move it off to the side so that I can have a nice clean workspace and freely move my elbows. All right, I want to check in on everybody, see how y'all are doing. Give me a thumbs up if you're doing okay out there, you're following along. If you're having any problems or I'm going too fast, I'm okay with you letting me know. Just put a comment in the chat there so I can make sure that I am at a good pace for everybody. Thank you, Ms. Tina, I appreciate that. Perfect, okay. So when you do the line here, I want to point out that you have a couple different options for the lines. So mine's still a little wet. So if mine's a little wet, yours may be wet also. But I want to point out here, in this particular design, I actually took the marker and followed along with those curved lines, those wavy lines. It is not required, but it's a look. So that is an option, but it's not required. I did also, to help frame and complete this work of art, use the marker and outlined right over my lines, just so it would have a nice complete frame. That frame could be a thick line or a thin line, but ideally, oh, great question. See, Kelly, you're right on page with me here. Do you outline the curves also? So that, like I said, is completely up to you as an option. In this example here, I did do that option, but I do have some examples in the PowerPoint here that do not have that, and I will pull that up for you. Let me go back to that page here. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna make me the spotlight, and I'm gonna share these examples with you real quick before we actually do this outline. Okay, and so this is also in that PowerPoint I was telling you about. Here are some examples. So the one that I'm showing you in front of me here is the one that's on the far left. The one next to that is monochromatic, so it's all the same colors in the same part of the color wheel. The one after that, you can see it's just each line has its own color. It looks like for the most part, there is a thin line of some capacity identifying the different wavy sections there. Now the one that's on the far right there, I really went to town with the graphic style and the shapes and patterns. So that definitely has the black lines on the black marker on the wavy lines. All right, so I'm going to now go back to my example here. And I'm going to show you the outline. Can you confirm with me that it is the main screen? Just give me a thumbs up and let me know that this, my example here, is the main screen. I'm at the main screen here. No? Okay. So if I turn me off, am I the main screen now here? Thumbs up. All right, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, great question here. So should you paint everything that's inside the ruler line? Ultimately, yes, for your work of art, you will want to paint everything that is inside the line. So here on this example, which I haven't technically got to yet, but you can see I've got my ruler outline, I've put all my words in place, and then I will go and paint. Now this is two different designs here. You can't see my work. Let me make sure.
I can't, you're not pinned to your work. It's pinned to your picture.
Oh, thank you for letting me know. Okay, so, all right, how about now, friends? Is my artwork pinned? All right, wonderful. Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate that. So in this example here, I have my rectangle, I've got my wavy lines, all my words are relatively centered in those lines, and I did pretty much, I painted every single portion within the rectangle. This is obviously a completed design, not the same design as the one next to it, but it is a complete design, and it is all painted with watercolor. Okay, let's go back to our sample here, and I'm going to start off with the words and then, or excuse me, the letters, and then from there I'll go ahead and I'll trace the letters, the wavy line, and from there I will know if I need to enhance the individual letters at that point to make them show up a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and put these lines in here. I already know I'm going to go a little bit darker, a little bit thicker with mine. All right, so I've got the word in place. So now I'm going to outline the wavy lines. And once I have that in place, I can see if it's harder to read a letter or not. For instance, does my L get lost? Well, it does a little bit. So what I want to do is just thicken up that section of the L so that it's more visible. But overall, I like to thicken it up a little bit more. And then I can stylize it a little bit. If I want to add a little tail to a letter. The same for the top of the F. I'll make that just a hair thicker just so you can see that F. And then I like to add that little, just a little tick mark on the letter so that it's easy identifiable as that letter, the letter F. And then for the top of the J, I will make that just a hair thicker, just so it is visible. And I'm doing this all upside down for you because of the way the camera is positioned. So I'm a little upside down here. And so in these other sections, theoretically, are other lines of text. Now, when it comes to the top and bottom, that is flat. So it is flat across the bottom and the top. So the wavy lines are only on the inside. All right, so friends, I would like to show you one more example before we get going for the evening. And it is my progression for this recent work of art that I just created. So you can see on the far left, I've got my rectangle. I have my phrase equally spaced out in the lines there, in the wavy lines in the sections. Then I filled in each of the spaces. Now, I found that it's easier if you're going with a colorway. There was no colorway in this particular one. It was a free-for-all. Whatever I went with, that's what I went with. And so what I did is, if I started with orange was my first color, I said, okay, I'm going to put orange one space here, one space there, maybe one here, one over there. I kind of went one little orange all over, so then I wasn't going back and forth to colors. So after I was done with orange, I said, okay, I'm going to go with green, and I'll throw a little green here and there throughout. Did the same with blue, red, and then after that, I did have a few other spaces left over, and I had really had to think, what do I want those colors to be? Because I don't want them to be the repeat of the color I already have. So from there, I used my permanent marker, and you can see I did the fun, creative design text there. And the last image that you see is where I added the outline. In the wavy lines, I did that in the black marker. I have this example also in the professional video that is available to you on YouTube. And that's all I have for this evening, ladies. So the next step for you is to make your work of art using that larger paper. And like I said, your first one, I would just use the whole page. And then after that, if you would like to do something a little bit smaller, since you're familiar with how to use watercolors, then maybe do a smaller work of art then. So you have enough paper to do multiple works of art there. And I think I've given you all the tools that you need to create some beautiful art. I am available for any questions that you may have. If you don't think of them right now and you think of them a little bit later, go ahead and shoot me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I will be following up and checking in on you ladies probably mid next week. Right before Christmas, I'll say. I'll check in with you, see how everybody's doing, send you an email of some of the other works that I've come up with, and then some tips of what to do once you've completed your art, because we need to press our art in order to be able to properly frame and present them. So I'm open for any questions that you may have. Go ahead and type them in there. I appreciate you spending some time with me tonight, ladies. I hope I've motivated you and inspired you to create some beautiful phrase art with watercolors. Really, the sky's the limit when it comes to these watercolors. I was able to do something a little more monochromatic, which I really am enjoying this piece that I did. I will pin that video here. The piece that I have in the middle section here, I really do like that. And I think my next watercolor phrase will be utilizing the watercolor as the outline, because I really like that concept of keeping it all watercolor. It is a little bit more challenging to outline in watercolor, but I think that tinier brush, that smaller brush that comes in the watercolors itself, may be a better option to outline with instead of that larger green handled brush. So that's the brush I will be using to outline my letters once I paint it. All right, friends, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Be safe, be well, and be creative.